Some people just have to learn lessons the hard way, and whether I want to admit it or not, I'm probably one of those people. Hi everyone, this is Andrew at Plainview Farm, and in today's video I'm going to talk about a few mistakes that you should avoid if you are a small-scale farmer. The first one is quite simple, which is don't put all your eggs in one basket. One of the biggest mistakes that any farming enterprise can make is over-specialization in one area. In fact, not that long ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago, it was quite common for you to walk onto a farm in the United States and see multiple enterprises, multiple farm operations going on at one time. Just because the central focus of a farm might be beef cattle or dairy production, that doesn't mean that that's all they are. You were likely to see a group of hogs, sheep, even a poultry house or two on this farm. Even crop farms didn't see the level of specialization that we see today with maybe only 1 or 2 crops grown at one time. In fact, you would see as many as 4 or 6 different crops grown during one season. And the primary reason behind that was because crops fail and markets crash. So the old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket, is profoundly sound advice, because if you do put all your eggs in one basket and A, you either drop that basket, or B, the bottom falls out of it, well, there's all your eggs broken on the ground and you have nothing. So while yes, you may have a centerpiece enterprise on your farm, it's always a good idea to try to be developing secondary enterprises that can help keep things afloat. Because it's just like investing. If you were going to put money into the stock market, it's not very wise to put all of your money into one company, into one stock, because if that company were to go belly up, well, what's happened to all of your money, right? It's vanished. Any halfway competent financial advisor is going to tell you that you need to spread your money out so that you reduce your risk, but also you enhance your chances for growth and success. Well, the same is also true on your farm. Don't put all of your money on one thing, hoping that that's going to get you to the promised land. Now, number 2 can be somewhat of a sticky subject for some, and I don't mean to offend anybody. I'm primarily speaking from experience here. Avoid debt, if at all possible. A very important thing that needs to be mentioned is that farm debt is at an all-time high within the United States, and over half of American farms lose money every single year. Of course, as I said before, I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I've never made any of these mistakes, that I've always done everything perfectly right, I've never borrowed any money. Again, that's the furthest thing from the truth. I've borrowed money on just about anything you can borrow money on. I'm serious. Whenever it comes to the farm, I've borrowed money on equipment, I've borrowed money on tools, I've borrowed money on livestock, I've borrowed money on land, I've borrowed money on everything. And the same thing was true, generally speaking, in each and every situation. And that is that I spent more time worrying about how to service the debt, how to pay that note, than I did actually trying to either grow my market or be a good farmer. And whenever you're worried about servicing that debt, you don't make sound decisions. You end up neglecting things that you otherwise wouldn't, whether that be taking care of the land or that is caring for the animals. Whatever it is, you're going to make decisions that are primarily focused on paying that note. That way you don't end up in an upside down relationship with the bank. So another part of that was I could never seem to save any money because I was constantly spending money on servicing debt. I couldn't grow my farm because I was spending money on debt. As I said, each and every decision was centered around, how am I going to pay this bill? So with hindsight being what it is, I probably should have saved money for a year or two and started growing my farm small that way than it was to look at debt and say, oh, this is a great way for me to grow fast, and jump off into it and really basically not be able to grow at all. Because again, the truth is the debt was a hindrance. It really didn't help much. So if at all possible, start small without debt and work your way up to where you want to be. You might be surprised how quickly you can get there. Now, my next tip is to avoid new equipment. If at all possible, whenever you can, buy used equipment. Now, I'm not too good to admit that I love shiny new tractors as much as the next guy, but you know what? shiny new tractors are often expensive, and I just mentioned avoiding debt on your farm. Well, I borrowed money to buy a new tractor once. Well, it wasn't actually a brand new tractor, it was a new enough tractor. But still, the point remains. I borrowed money to buy this newer tractor, and then I began to find some things out. Number one, newer tractors are expensive to work on. Specifically, the tractor that I bought, I discovered, was built with an undersized clutch that was prone to wearing out too soon. It also was built with front hub assemblies. It was a four-wheel assist tractor, but it was built with front hub assemblies that were also undersized, and the tractor had a fiber head gasket that was prone to blowing out. Needless to say, this tractor that I thought was going to make my life so much easier ended up becoming a major headache. I had to spend a great deal more money than I originally borrowed just to keep the thing up. In fact, I've got a couple videos on the channel where I put a new head gasket in the tractor. So if you're interested, you might want to check those out. Then, to add insult to injury, whenever I finally sold the tractor, I ended up with a nice little tax bill, even though I technically sold the tractor at a loss. My point here is that if you're going to be buying equipment, buy used equipment, especially if you're just starting out, that's already been depreciated. So this tractor right here behind me is a 1948 Farmall M that I purchased with cash. Now, she may not be much to look at, but she's mine, and she's cheap to work on, and parts are pretty well readily available. One of the other issues that I had with my newer tractor was that it seemed to suffer from OOS syndrome, which OOS syndrome is out of stock. More often than not, it seemed like parts were out of stock. In fact, when the front hub assembly came apart on me, I was hauling a load of dirt in this tractor. It wasn't overloaded, it was just a bucket load of dirt on the front of this tractor. And the bearing gave out on that front hub assembly. All the fluid poured out all over the ground, and there the tractor sat. I ended up jacking it up, putting the axle on a jack stand, and hunting for parts. It sat there actually behind the house over here for quite a while until I was actually able to find all the parts that I needed to rebuild that hub assembly. And I promise you it wasn't easy to find those parts. I went from dealer to dealer to dealer, and most of them were out of stock on what I needed. And the ones that did have parts, they didn't have everything I needed. So we ended up trying to piece everything together from one place to the next. I even ended up having to order some online, and honestly, it was just a really big headache. Now I know that not all brands are the same. Quality issues from one to the next, may vary, but the point remains that sometimes you end up with something that you thought was going to make your life easier turning into a big headache for you and ending up being more of a problem than you ever expected it would be. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you should never ever buy new equipment. Sometimes you may need a piece of new equipment. There may be something that will pay for itself on your farm, something that you'll actually use that will actually be beneficial. By all means, buy new equipment if you can afford it. And it's the same way if there's something that you want, buy it if you can afford it. Again, it's your decision at the end of the day. You're the one that's going to have to live with it, good, bad, or indifferent. My main point here is that new equipment generally does more harm than good to the bottom line and profitability if you're trying to build a farm business. It's just one of those facts of life. Now, while the next point here may ruffle some feathers, I want you to understand that that's not my intention, but a common excuse that's given for spending money on a farm is, well, I need the tax break. Now, it's one thing if you were going to buy this piece of equipment or a tool or piece of machinery, whatever it may be in the first place, but it's a complete other issue if you were buying something solely to offset your tax burden. And why is that? Well, the reason for that is because if you spend, say, $10,000 on a piece of equipment, what you're going to actually save yourself in taxes is not going to be $10,000. You're going to save yourself a percentage of that, maybe about 20% of that $10,000 is actually what you're going to save on your tax bill. To use another old adage here, you're spending dollars to save dimes. Then if you add on top of that the possibility that you're going to have to pay additional insurance premium as well as property taxes, and of course if you go borrow the money to buy this piece of equipment, you're going to have to pay interest. Your savings rapidly declines. It reminds me of how retailers will sometimes start these point systems for your purchases. The more money you spend, the more points you get, and then you get some cheap prize that isn't worth a fraction of what you've actually spent in order to get the prize. What you've actually done is spent more money than you actually would have on something that you really didn't need solely to get some kind of little trinket. Or they may give you a discount on this overpriced item. At the end of the day, you're far better off to just pay your tax bill and move on with life. Again, unless of course we're talking about something that you were already going to buy anyway to get the job done. Spending a whole lot of money on something you didn't really need is a great way to either go broke or stay broke if you're a small farmer. Now, my last point here is probably one that I cannot emphasize enough, which is do not allow the fear of being left behind to cause you to fall into trends and fads. Trends and fads can quickly cause you to betray your market, and your primary job, if you are a direct-to-consumer farmer anyway, is to know your market and to meet their needs. The most important and valuable lesson that I have learned on this direct-to-consumer farm journey is this: you have to know your market. If you don't know your market, you'll never be successful, and that's because your market is driven by the people who are actually participating in your market. It's not driven by fads or trends that are going on who knows where around the country. I mentioned in a recent video that my local market doesn't have a whole lot of interest in non-GMO products or grass-fed, grass-finished beef. Now, that doesn't mean that those things are bad. It just means that my market really isn't interested in them. If I spend a whole lot of time and energy trying to build up these products, my market is going to look at me and say, that's really not within our price point. That's not something that we can afford. We're going to go elsewhere. And I'd be left holding the bag. While there is a very small segment of buyers in my market that are interested in those kinds of products, there simply aren't enough of those buyers to go around. So what may be popular in one area isn't necessarily going to be popular in all areas. In reality, you have to understand that your customers are going to be loyal to you because of you. There are a whole lot of different places that they can go buy products. They're interested in you, and if you actually listen to them, listen to what they want, and then meet those desires, that's how you're going to build loyalty, and that's how you're going to continue to sell products and continue to grow your business. So if you allow yourself to constantly be swayed and pushed around by what you think may or may not be the next big thing, well, your customers, your market, they're going to perceive you to be unstable, and no one likes to make purchases from someone that they perceive to be unstable. They're just not going to do it. So the best advice I can give you is to find out what people in your market are actually buying, and then find a way that you can provide that to them. So if you found this video to be enjoyable or useful, please do me a favor and hit that like button so other folks can find it as well. And if you haven't yet, I ask that you would please consider subscribing to my channel. As always, I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. Excuse me, chicken. Where are your eggs?